Here, Daddy, start us off with the dedication.
Oh, okay. For my father, your Zeit, Yaakov Pesach ben Moshe Chaim.
Shem Heaven Alea.
Thank you. Of Simchas.
Okay, so now today's daf. We're starting with the Mishnah on Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph. We are by so let me share the screen. So Hadelet Shiva Mukse. So here's the case where we have a here. So we have a doorway leading into your backyard. Yeah. So again, cuts there. We've been using a lot. That's the front yard where you do a lot of your things. The Mukse was the lesser used area that most people did not have, but some people had it. So you had a door leading out there, or Chadakim Sheva Pirza, or let's say if you had a bundle of thorns used to close off a breach in your wall, Umachat Slot, or if you had reed mats, Ein no Alin Bahen Elim Kain Gvohim Min Haaretz. So all of these things, right? And you can only use them to lock up if they're above the ground, even when they're open. So also that means that these thorns, they're not like thorns that are attached to the ground. It's think when you ever been the Wild West movies where that they have like those I don't know what they're called, those little piles of thorns that like roll across. It's like one of those, but as long as it has to be, it's like it's
tumbleweed.
The tumbleweed, yeah, like one of those guys, right? So you got like one of those guys rolling on through. So the question is, can you count that as a right or again, there's all these different types of doors. So the question is, are you allowed to move them to close something to close an area on Shabbos, or are you in violation of Hotzah by closing this door and moving it? And so that's the question. So now we're trying to figure out, what does this mean? Which type of these doorways is permissible versus not? So right, so now we didn't figure out what each of these things were, as well as what do we mean by above the ground. So Urminhu, Delet Hanigreret, Umachatzelet Hanigreret, Bekankan Hanigrar. So if we have a door that drags, a mat that drags, or a lattice work of some sort that drags. Let's see if you see all the pictures here. Here, so okay, so we have the door, we have the mat, and we have the kankan. Okay, kankan is either a very large pin, or it's some sort of lattice work. Those are two different opinions for what that one is. So bisman shekshur mitluyin, when they're tied and hanging, so then you can use them. Right, no only mahem b'Shabbat. The ein sarich lomar b'yom tov. So this BAYT said that if they're tied, and it being that they're attached, see over here we have this nice string over here, so they're attached. So all right, assuming they're attached and they're hanging, then that's sufficient. So now we're trying to figure out what that means, right? They're attached, they're hanging. So we're still like, wait. So how do we have that versus our Mishnah that says that they're dragging into problems? We're like, wait, what's the difference? Like, why is one good and one not good? So Amar Abaye b'sheish lehem tzir. So Abaye says no. What this BAYT is saying about the case that they're hanging and like they're attached, it means they have a hinge, right? Right, so that means it's a proper door that we recognize nowadays. You got a hinge, you move back and forth, right? So that's when it's mutter. Rava Amar b'shaya lehen tzir. Rava is a little more megalith. Says no, not that it currently actively has one. Rather, you can tell that it used to have one, right? As in, like, even if the hinges fell off, but you can tell that it's still got, like, by the edge of the door, there's a place where the hinges go, and like even if the bolt for the hinge, broke or disappeared, you still know, like, oh, that door is supposed to go over there, so that's good enough. So, Meitvei. So now we have that. Now, in regards to what we explained until now, we have a BAYT that would say that that's all wrong. So delet hanigreret, again, so if you have a door that drags on the ground. Machatzal hanigreret, kan hanigrar. Again, it's the same three things we had before, the previous Breita. Bisman shekshurin utluyin v'omin haaretz afilu nima nolin bahen v'imlav ein olin bahen. So now it's again we still have the same case of the the door, the mat, the lattice work that normally drag along the ground, but if they're tied and they end up being above the ground by even a hair's breadth, then you can lock with them. But if not, you can't. So the question is, so when are you allowed to use it to close the door or not? Right. So what's the difference between? So how do we explain this in light of the previous Beit as well as our Mishnah? So Abaye mataras l'tameh, Rava mataras l'tameh. So Abaye and Rava both have answers. Abaye mataras l'tameh, or sheish l'hamtzir, or shagvua min haaretz. So Abaye answers according to his opinion. He says either it has a hinge or it's above the ground, either or. Rava mataras l'tameh, k'shehar l'hamtzir, or k'shagvua min haaretz. And Rava says no. We say that this context of it being above the ground, even a hairbreadth, so that's another condition. It's not necessarily connected to the previous one. Either it has to have clearly in the shape of a door, it's got the hinge from before, or it's above the ground. Either way would allow you to use it to close the door, the access point on Shabbos or Yom Tov. It would be the same thing for both, right? So now we're gonna now we have another case in the Beit of a Breita that's related to this as well. So Taner Banan, Sochi Kotzin L'Chavilin Sheitkinan L'Pirza Shebechatzer Bizman Shekshurin Utluyin Nolin Mehem Shabbat Ve'in Tzarich Lomar B'Yom Tov. So if you have branches of thorn bushes or bundles of wood, is there a nice picture here? Okay, not quite. So I guess you have a bundle of thorn bushes or bundles of wood, and are placed in such a way that they can close it off, right? So similar to this, right? So when are you allowed to use them? When they are all tied together, and when they're tied and hanging, that's when you could use them. But if not. So, right, so Tani Rabbi Chia, Delet Almana Hanigreret Ein Nolin Ba. So now Rabbi Chia says that a widowed door that drags on the ground, you can't use. So now his question is, Hechidami Delt Almana, what's a widowed door? Yikad Amri Dechad Shifa, Yikad Amri Delay Le Gashma. So one says that it is built from a single plank, right? So that's this one right here. So as in normally when you build a door, you'd probably have modern doors. You have multiple pieces of wood put that together, looking nice, right? Not just have like a slice, so shoved it there. That's not how people make doors. Alternatively, it's missing a lowered. Here the question is, what's a gashma? So a gashma could either be the here Rashi says it's these brichim. It means that there's a reinforced bar on the door to make sure it's strong, right? Normally you have planks going one way followed by the wood going the other way. You see this in more classical doors than the modern doors because they tend to hide it nowadays. But again, doors prior over 200 years old, you'll see this feature. Also, right, we basically have the planks go one way, and then for extra strength, you have a cross beam. Alternatively, I see the Steinsaltz mentions that it's the question of whether or not there's a lower door sill, right? Meaning, is it on the bottom? Like, is there a here? So this is this guy over here, right? So is there a place that it would to show that would be a clean closure? Okay. So Amar of Yehuda, hi. Okay, so now we're going to do another case that's related to this as far as what you're allowed to move and not move on Shabbos Yom Tov. So hi Madurta. Actually, now we're on Yom Tov now. So now we're talking about the case of if you wanted to build a bonfire on Yom Tov, right? Or Madura in the Hebrew word, right? These is supposed to, that's the Hebrew's Madura as opposed to Madurta, which is Aramaic. So you're making your building or bonfire. So mimala lamata shari mimata lamala asir. So if you're building your bonfire, you have to do it up down as opposed to bottom up, because if you build because depending on how you build your firewood, you see here, right? So that if you basically are holding up the top piece of the wood and then you kind of like stick things underneath it till you get up to the point where you want your final piece of your final wood to fire to being. So that's fine, because that doesn't look like you're trying to build something. It looks like you're just it's clearly that you're trying to make a cooking fire. But if you were to have laid out your logs, one by one, and then stack them up top, like so, come at looking out like in figure 55, starting from the bottom. So then it would look like you are actually building, and that would be a problem. Similarly, in regards to a cauldron, the chayin kedera, Bayat is when you're putting out eggs. So that's this one over here. The way you're supposed to lay out the eggs on either in the fire or on the grate. So the question is how you do that. That's picture 56. We've got the question again, the order of doing so. You want to do it in a way that it looks like you're cooking, not in a way that you're building. Similarly for the way you're putting down the cauldron. That's again, so it's cauldron thing. That's like like we think of like a witch, like the big pot that's got the little that you put it on top of with the 3 feet. So do we have it? Yeah. So similarly, basically in all these cases where you're building making a structure out of the wood below it or out of something else below it, the key thing is that you have your food item or the top item of the fire is on top, so it's clear that what you're doing is for cooking, not for anything else. Similarly, if you are arranging barrels, you also, in order to make sure that it looks like it's clear that it's temporary storage and it's not that you're building a structure, you should do so in a different order. So it's not like you're potentially doing any building. Similarly, right. So and then we said by poria, which is for a bed. Okay, so that's over here. So basically, in terms of the ordering of the way that you are building your, this is a collapsible bed. So saying the order that you should be doing it is you should do it in the way that you have it's clear that you're holding up the beams first before you stick the base underneath it, because that's the way you make a bed. It's supposed to the way you'd end up building. And Tosfot throws in that similarly, if you're making a stack of books, you shouldn't stack it the way you normally do. You should also stack it in a little bit out of order way to make it clear that you're not. To make it clear that you are that you're not building, but you're rather using it for multi-purpose. Okay, so Amrlay. Okay, so now we've got now we're going to so once we mentioned the word thorns, so we're going to talk about people who are thorns in our sides, namely the tzdukim. So Amrlay Ahu Mina Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. So a certain heretic once screamed at Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, and he called him Chidka, you thorn. So Dichtiv B'chu Tovam Kechedek, as he says about you, the best of you are like thorns, according to Pasuk and Micha. So, right, so this was the insult from the min to the from the heretic. Which school he was from, probably the Tzdukim, could have been a BAYT, unclear. Anyways. So, and then the response of Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya was Shatya, fool, Shvil Sefer Dekrai. It says you should have kept reading. Tichtiv Yashar Mi Misruchla. So, as he's towards the end of the at the end of the verse, it says the most upright is worse than a thorn hedge, meaning that calling you a thorn was a good thing. The elamai to tovan b'chedek. So what do you mean by the best of these of the wise ones is like considered to be like the thorns or briar? So Shem Mahadakin. Sorry, Kishem Chadakim Halalu Maginim Al Pirza, Kach Tavim Shabanu Maginim Alenu. So just like thorns can be used to seal up a breach, like to make it, to work as a makeshift door. Similarly, the best of the best of us, meaning the tzaddikim, also protect us. Alternatively, this means to that they grind the nations of the world into Gehenna. Shneimar kumi vadoshi batzion kikarnech asim barzel farsatayach asim nechusha v'hadikot amim rabim. Alternatively, and how do we know that's what that Jews can cause the sinners to being sent to Gehenna? To the rise and thrash, O daughters of Zion, for I will make you your horn as if it's from iron, and I will make your hoofs brass, and you shall beat to pieces. That's the v'chadikot, that v'chadikot, which sounds like the chedek from before. Amim rabim, many people, right? So that's how God will show that who's right. Okay. Now once we have dealt with the thorns, now we're back to our discussion of Eruvin. Okay. So so now before we were talking about the type of doorways. So now once we're on the topic of doors, we're now going to go to how can you open these doors. So during the time of the Mards, they had certain types of keys. 1 second, I'm going to switch to another. Here we go. So here's what ancient Roman keys used to look like. Okay, that's over here on the right. Okay, everybody sees that photo, right? So basically, you see the part that looks like the door hinge. So basically, you stick your hand in and down, and then you'd have see where there's the little teeth here, and then those would correspond to the lock. And then by pulling, then you'd kind of pull up, and then you could be able to get the to open the door. So so this is the key, and as far as it's not the same as nowadays where it's just a little hole. It was actually like a pretty big one. You're like, I had to stick your actual hand all the way down, and you needed this long hook thing because the point was to make it really hard to pick, meaning that it would be hard for somebody to simply reach in and get to it. So you would have to put your hand all the way in and then use this thing too in order to do it. So the question is, how does this work? Okay, so let's go back to the Rishuya part, and now let's read the Mishnah. Okay, everybody sees that. Great. Okay, let me get back to the one. Okay. A person should not stand in the private domain and open the public domain. Or vice versa, right? So depending on where the key is versus where the door is, what is from what to what, right? So you should make sure that whatever you're doing, you're not violating, going from one rishus to another rishus. Whereas also nowadays is putting a key in a lock, right? So nowadays it's generally viewed now to be a problem by most people because again the keys they had back then were keys you literally would push on through. Let's say think the style of key, like the keyhole we can see see through, or as I mentioned the Roman keys where you literally stick your whole hand in. So those keys are problematic. Whereas many would say that modern day keys, putting them into the door isn't a problem because there's no actual hole going on through. So therefore you're not actually moving from one rishus to another rishus. You just need to be careful that when you have to unlock the door, that you don't push the key into the other rishus afterwards. That's mainly all thing you have to be careful about. But as far as putting it in the hole, wouldn't be an issue now as it was back then. Okay, back to the Mishnah. Sorry about that. Just want to make sure I got that in. So Ella Imkain Asama. So what would you want? If you wanted to use these type of keys that go all the way through, right, with these big locks. But if you want how to be able to access it, rather you must make a wall. Meir says it needs to be 10 tefachim walls around. So this would be, let's say, if you have, this would work. Let's say if you had by your, so like you say the landing in your house, a couple steps up, and then you've got walls on the side. That's good, and and then you have and then you've got your mechitza, and then you're good to go. So that's Rabbi Meir's opinion, is you should make walls on the side. So now we're going to question whether that's really the case. So in the Mishnah. So Amr Lo, Ma'aseh b'shuk shel patamim shaya b'Yerushalayim. Once we're talking about there's a meat market where they used to fat, again, patamim is those are fattened. So those are again fattened. They're fattening their meat for slaughter. So they used to leave the key on the window on top. Do we have a diagram of where they used to leave it? Okay, we'll get to it more in the Gemara, discuss the details of where that was. Okay, so they used to place the key on the window that was above the door, right? So or the ledge. So pretend this is a window, right? So this is where you're leaving the key. So Rabbi Yossi, Omer, Shuk felt Samarim Haya. So Rabbi Yossi says this was actually the market of the wool traders, right? So basically we're saying, so what do you mean there's a problem with this? Because this is their practice they used to do. So wait, how did they used to do that? So, and then we'll get to how the how of that in the Gemara. Okay. So the Gemara says, V'Rabbanan Amar Rabbi Meir Rishut Harabim Umahadru Inu Carmelite. So the Rabbanan. So all right. So the question. So the Rabbanan and Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah are talking about the case of Rishut Harabim. So and then yet it sounds like from the other case that we responded to is that of a Carmelite, right? So the first case we have is clearly Rishut Harabim in the Mishnah, and then all of a sudden we have the case of the poultry market, which sounds like it's a Carmelite because you're dealing with like the windowsill. That's not for sure really proper. What's going on? So what are we talking about? So the Amar Rabba Bar Chana Amar B'Yochanan Yerushalayim Yilmalei Dlakta Naop Alayla Chaybin Alem Mishum Rishut Harabim. So Rabba Chana says we're referring to this is about Yerushalayim, that it used to be that if it wasn't for the fact that Yerushalayim had gates that closed at night, it would have been considered to be a problem, and it would have been a Rishut Harabim you wouldn't be able to carry. But the gate is what solved it. So now we're trying to figure out at what time in history it's considered to be Yerushalayim is going to be a Carmelite versus when it's considered to be a Rishut Harabim. So Amar Papa Kan Kodem Shefratzu Ba Pratzot Kan Acha Shefratzu Ba Pratzot. Now the question comes down to within the walls, were the walls was it fully closed in, or had they already opened openings on the sides of the walls, in which case then it's no longer considered to be locked at night, right? So that's 64 versus 65. Because once you have a road going on through, meaning let's say by Shar Yafo, where they opened it up for roads for car traffic. So once you opened it up, with no longer being closed at night, and now it's fully open. So that means that the previous heter of Ninal Balila wouldn't apply. Because that's saying that once if a whole city has a wall around it, you lock it at night. So then even if it should have been a Rishut Harabim, but because you closed it at night, then that's what prevents it from being a Rishut Harabim. Okay. So this again, that concept of locking doors and how that works that we discussed at the beginning of the second, basically it's because once you have closed it, then therefore you can't really call it public access if it's locked. Okay. So Rava Amar Seifat An Lashari Yina. So Rava said the last part of the Mishnah we have of meaning talking about the case of the meat market and of the wool market. So what's that case? So those are teaching us about the way we work with a guarding gate. So think of our car. Let's say I'm looking over at Clark. So some people have pretend for a minute that Clark Avenue is considered to be a Rishut Harabim D'Oraisa. It's not. Don't worry. And then let's say somebody has a All right, and the question is like, so those garden gates, and sorry, we're calling it a Carmelit. So here, according to this case, right? So if you'll have like, if a gate from your garden or your backyard that leads out into the Carmelit. So what do you say then? So Hachi Kamar, Lo Yamod B'Rishut Yachid, B'Yutah Carmelit, B'Karmelit, B'Rishut Yachid. You shouldn't stand in one area and open another one, or vice versa. Right. So again, this is very much our case of opening doors. Right. So again, Carmelit is the not quite Rishut Torah, but not quite Rishut Yachid case. So again, most roads would be considered to be a Carmelit, unless because normally we are not standing on a highway while we are like most people's doors on a highway. Right. Normally there's the main road, the highway, and then there's the secondary roads off of that. Like so most roads nowadays would at worst be considered to be a Carmelit, unless it's literally a main road straight on through. Again, whether or not you'd call Steels, which and other roads in Toronto that go straight on through for miles and miles and miles, rather or not is a separate discussion. For more on that, I'll forward you to Rabbi Zierings. I believe he gave a share on that on my Torah. I can send it to you guys if you're interested. Right. So that's one thing. So, but if you wanted to be able to carry, what would you have to do? So now turning on to Amud Bet. So Elim Kain Asa Mechitza Gvoa Sar Tvachim Deveri Meir. Right. So this is saying in a Carmelit, right? So the standard case that we have now. So if you wanted to be able to open your the door to the door to your garden. So there. So again, the garden being Rishut Yachid versus the Carmelit. So therefore, that's what we're talking about, and that would be the problem, right? So in order to do so, you need to make sure you have, as we have over here in 63, you have to make sure that you have a little thing surrounding you. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. That Amrullo, and now the Chachamim are turning to him and saying, Ma'aseh b'shuk shel tamim b'shaya b'Yerushalayim. And now we're saying that this is where they used to put the key on top. That's in this one over here, right? So again, right here. So here, now we're showing the the redone case, right? So again, so the way you wanted to do this is Meir wants you to have this little thing surrounding you in order to get the key off the ledge. And then the Chachamim are turning around and saying, like, wait a minute, we had a similar case, but on the other side, this wasn't my garden, it was a meat market, and we let you do it. So Rabbi Yossi Omer Shuk Shel Samar Maya, and Rabbi Yossi says it was even the wool market, so then even less of a thing you need on Shabbos, but even so, they allowed to access that area. They did it that way. Okay. So here we are. Okay, so Tanur Banan. Again, more cases of doors and opening and how we get to them. Okay, so Tanur Banan. Pitche Sharigina. So these are the garden gates. Bizman sheyesh lahem beit shar b'bifnim potech v'nol b'bifnim. B'bachutz potech v'nol b'bachutz. So depending on where the gatehouse is which side you're supposed to stand on while opening it. So if the guardhouse is on the inside, you're supposed to open it and close it from when you're on the inside. Okay, but if the gatehouse is on the outside, then you should open it from the outside, meaning where the gatehouse is. Mikan, let's say there's both sides. Potach, v'nol mikan. You can open or close from either side, because there's this nice area here protecting you, allowing you to open it nice and easily. If you don't have a gatehouse on either side of it, meaning that therefore there's no way for you to access the key from the other side, and therefore you are stuck. Right. So again, the gatehouse so that would nowadays be, let's say, the antechamber leading in. Let's say, since I'm sure Danny and Elliot are familiar with the setup we have here at the conservatory, right? So that little area you walk in first before you use the key. Actually, everybody here knows the conservatory. Shmuel too, right? That's silly, right? So everybody knows that, right? So that room, right? So then not the gatehouse proper, like that's a BAYT. That's too far away for these purposes. we're saying, let's say to get to the building, like that type of structure, you walk in and then there's that little bit there. So that area, whether it be from this side or the other side, is perfect because that way, again, don't worry, there's no looking issues. There's an Eruv and there's a fence around the whole area to begin with. But pretending that there wasn't any of those things, right? So there's absolutely no issue of walking in. And let's say the key was like was on top there on on a box or something, you could take it down or really easily open it, put it right back, no worries. Okay, but if there was no building on either side of that door, then it similarly would be a problem. Okay, so and similarly, similarly with any shops that open into the public domain, if the key or when the lock is below 10 to the ground, maybe Mafteach Me'er Shabbat Me'yuchol Ba'alei Skopa. And if that's the case, you should have brought the key from before Shabbos and put it on top of the meaning on the bottom here, on the threshold down here. Okay, this is the Skopa, the bottom part. Okay, because basically you don't want to go from below 10 to above 10. So again, hopefully this is clear, right? That's the bottom, bringing it from down there. And then, okay, so, and then, but then the next day you can open and close it and then put it back down on the on the threshold down here each time, right? Because it's below 10. So the question is, where on the door is the lock? Because remember, when you put your key in with this type of lock, you're going to be moving reshuyot, and so therefore you want it to remain in the same rishus. So therefore, if it's below 10, you want it to keep it below 10. If it's above 10, you want to keep it above 10. So that's why if the lock itself is above 10, then maybe maftech and bear shabbat man'ul. Then instead you want to put it on the over here on the upper on the then. I'm sorry, you want to leave it in the lock itself, right? The next day you can then put it again. So now we're talking about on top of this lock. We're leaving aside the fact that this is like not remotely safe, but meaning like your lock is not doing anything to leave it right there, but whatever. We'll assume that the robbers are dumb and don't remember the lock. Okay.
What's the point of locking the door?
I agree. If you leave the key in, I'm not sure what the point is. Maybe the guy won't want thing to look there, but right. So maybe he's got it. Maybe it's hidden. It's hidden somehow. I'm not sure. So yeah,
in the lock.
Yeah, leave it in the lock or on the lock. It's like okay, like they're gonna find it. Okay. Maybe maftech mer Shabbat minichol ba'yiskofa l'malchar potech v'no machzor l'mukomo or b'chalon shagam petach. So now the Chachamim are giving us more leeway for where we can hide our key. We now have two places: under the doormat as well as on top of the door. So again, both these are halacha. Whether these are helpful or not, it's advised against using these type of places just because it's not safe. So like it's just not going to be helpful for you. So typically, like the in terms of safety, the way to do it is either A, you get a combination lock, or you get a combination lock that you put it in. Good morning, Michael. Okay, so we're on the bottom of Kuf Aleph on the bet. So again, we're talking about various types of keys and locks and where you place them and how to avoid transferring rishus in between. So we're pointing out where you can and can't do it. So currently we're in this case right here where you put the lock in order to access it. So according to the Gemara here, we are talking about it has to be within X. It's supposed to be in the same region as where the lock is. The lock is high. You want to put it on top of the lock itself. Or if it's low, you want to put it low. And again, this is irrelevant to whether or not it's actually going to protect your house or not. That's not seemingly the worry here, according to the Gemara. So again, so Chaim more and more makel, and they say that again, because this whole area is considered to be its own. It's not again, whether it be the threshold below or the little ledge on top. All those are considered to be not part of the Rishon Rabban proper because they're inside the doorway, so therefore they're considered to be places where you're allowed to place the item. For technicalities of how that would apply nowadays, it's very subjective. please ask me afterwards. It'll take a long time to explain each case. Suffice it to say, there are ways to get around almost all these things. You can use a lock if there's no Eruv, but for more on how that works, again, please, we can discuss that afterwards. Okay. Imyesh b'chalon arba al arba asur mipnei kashum wasim rishut rishut. On the other hand, if the window above over here is 4x4, we've got a problem because then you're moving from one rishut to another rishut. That's the real issue. It's both just the little edge here. We could say we could drag after the area proper. Okay. Okay, so now we're questioning. So and since I mentioned about the case of the shops opening to Tarbim, so Michlal de Beiskopat Carmelite. That implies that the threshold down here is considered to be a Carmelis. So high manual hechidami. Then what kind of lock are you having there? How's that working? Either late by arba makom turhu. For in a Carmelite already, that actually that wouldn't this small plant on the lock be considered makom tur and be perfectly fine to use. So what do you mean? What's the problem with being 4x4? As in it should be makom, as in like it should be usher. So the eat by arba b'ha lemarabanan bizman shamano malam esara mevi maptech me'er shabbat menichol vayskov b'alamachu b'tech v'nobo b'machzir l'kuskov all b'chon shalom g'mei petach b'ha kamatalto b'karmel l'jatarabi hatush t'yachid. So now the question would be, then if it is 4 and we're talking about a Carmelist, we got a problem, because then how are the Chachamim allowing you to place it on the window or on the threshold here if they're actually 4x4 tvachim and therefore they're considered to be an actual rishus? So then aren't we going from rishut? They're going from rishut hayachid from a Carmelit, meaning the place meaning the windowsill or the windowsill or the scope would be a rishut yachid, and then you are in a Carmelit. So then you're going from rishut yachid to Carmelit, and like how are you doing that? That's usher on Shabbos. So like how are we allowing you to do that then? But no, really the lock itself, the inside the lock here, it's not 4. So therefore, we're not putting any rishus. But the question is do we say that you carve out into the wall to include the lock as well? Does that get you to 4 tvachim? Rubaha pligi. And here's the argument. The question is, do you say that we're going to ignore it? We're going to, again, there's the lock outer mechanism part, and then there's the door itself, which has part of the locking in as well. So the question is, do you combine those two and say this is now all one rishus, or do you say no? There's the lock box, and then there's the door. They don't combine; they're separate, and that's the machloket. Okay. So again, from okay, no pictures. Okay, fine. So Amar Rabibi, Barabaye, Shamina, Meha Manita Tlat. Learn 3 things from this Mishnah. Shamina Chokim Lashlim, that you can actually, that you carve things out in order to check if they are considered to be the full amount. I mean, even though again this is currently filled in this part of the door, we then will cut into it and view it as if it's not there to make it be the 4x4, the 4x4 tefachim. Ushlamina Hadar Beit Rabbi Meir Misharigin. We also learned that Rabbi Meir ended up retracting his ruling of being permissible, and he also prohibited standing in the Carmelite. Again, he says the problem in terms of the Carmelite case. So similarly, he would have got. So it seems like here he ends up prohibiting it in the end. So and also we learn this is best explained when we learn from Ravdimi, who heard this when he's in Eretz Yisrael, that Techiyat Ravdimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ravdimi quoted Rabbi Yochanan, was living in Israel at the time. Makom she'ein bo arba al arba'a mutar livnei rishut harbim livnei rishut yachid l'chatef alav avad shlo yachlifu. And this is what helps with the case of Ravdimi quoting Rabbi Yochanan, that if you have a place that's less than 4x4, meaning it's makom tur, right? It's an area that's exempt because it's not its own domain. So both the people in the public domain as well as the private domain can utilize this space. And that's why whether you're on the inside or the outside, you would be able to open up the lock as long as you don't trade with the person on the other side of the lock. It's going to be fine. So therefore, moving the lock is not considered to be a problem. But as far as transferring it, that would be considered to be a problem. Right? So again, if you leave it the whole time in one rishus, then it's okay. But if you try to transfer it, then it's no good. Okay. I'm going to try and do a quick picture sum up. We're going to start with this mission with the next Mishnah tomorrow. Okay, so let's scroll back on top, because again, there's a lot of cases, a lot of diagrams, and we went through it a little bit quickly. So hopefully it'll be clear. Okay, so the question we started with was, which walls are considered to be, right, what types of doors are considered to be valid doors for opening and closing versus when is it, meaning versus when would you be over on Hotzah or over on Bona by moving it and closing it. So the basic rule is, if something is considered to be part of the structure and is meant to be a door and it's clearly a door, then opening and closing the door is fine, but if it's not, it's going to be a problem. So we mentioned about how, going from the house to the backyard, how the cases of, the thorns, again, the thorns are not, again, this is probably a tumbleweed type thing. If they're attached to the ground, you definitely can't move them because it's usher for other reasons. So again, you have your giant bald pile of thorns and you're just using it to close up, or let's say barbed wire even, but that's dangerous to touch. But anyways, right? So your tumbleweed in the doorway to keep everybody out. So that, or let's say, or this, this wood door or this reed mat. So these only work when they are considered to be hanging, right? When they're hanging, when they're tied and hanging. Then the question came down to, how much is it hanging, the distance between the two of them, and we ended up saying that it comes down to, right, or the hinge. For all these things, we say the important part is that it's tied on and that it looks like it is part of the door. And we said that the question that we got to the whole bit then of, again, of it being, does it need to have a hinge currently, or that it used to have a hinge? And we say that looks like it would work even as long as even if it doesn't currently, like, so that's a Abaye versus Rava. Abaye says that it needs to needs to have a hinge, whereas Rava says as long as it had a hinge, it's good enough, because people know that it looks like a door. So even if the hinge is currently missing, you can still close that door if it's currently, like, leaning up against the wall. Okay, then we discussed the case of what kind of wall it was. The door, a single board door versus having a breach. We discussed how when you are building things on Shabbos Yom Tov, you're supposed to do it in a different way than normal. So that, like when you're making a bonfire, or it's like putting together your collapsible bed, you shouldn't do it in a way that looks like you're building it something from scratch. Right? You should do it in a way that's a little bit different. So it's clear that you're doing it for the temporary purposes as much around Shabbos Yom Tov, not that you're doing construction. Again, sorry for running through. Then we get cases as it applies to setting up your firewood, your eggs, piling up barrels or books as well, or piling up your pots. Then we discussed a large part of today was discussing the case of using the locks, and when you can and can't, when you're going from one rishus to another rishus. Let me just show again, get a picture of what the ancient locks used to look like, just because I think it's to see how you take your hand, put it in, your hand into the hole, and then you'd be unlocking it. So you were definitely moving from one area to another area, which is why we have such a big problem. Modern day locks don't necessarily have that issue because they you can't really get through the other side. It's just and it's basically fully sealed. And then we discussed how you can solve these issues by either best way is by having a landing surrounding you like as such, or if you are then we discussed how you shouldn't transfer from one side to the other side. Because that would be us from the Rabin. We discussed again a question if it's on top over here, right? When are you allowed to take it off of the still on top? We discussed whether or not also the case of again the window still on over the door versus on top of versus the threshold, and when you could put it in or not. And we also discussed whether or not we consider the whole width of the door as relevant or not. Okay, anybody have any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Everybody.